Well, it seems that I have a wiring problem, an electrical problem with the forklift, turning it into a giant 6,000 pound paperweight or anchor. Anyway, what's going on is whenever I turn the key on, all the indicator lights are on and the forklift won't start because some of these are safety things that prevent you from driving around, like with the propane tank swung out back and things like that. So I'm going to have to break into the wiring and check it and do some checking and see what's wrong with it. Okay, so what we're doing here is I use these heat shrink wire connectors, and what they are basically, you have a connector, for an example, like so, and it has a crimpable end on each side. What you do is you strip the wire, stick it in there, and then you crimp it down, and then you use a heat gun and you heat it and it shrinks it, and it has a hot glue adhesive in there too, so it completely seals the jacket. It's a good way to make a wire connection. Water, if you do it right, water can't get in it, so that works. So after checking with a continuity meter, I found several wires that should not have been, according to the wiring diagram, shouldn't have had continuity together that did. And this is obviously a used forklift that we bought. You can see here where it had been repaired several times with tape. And then further checking the wiring as I unwrapped more of the bundle, I found other places where the wiring, the jacketing is melted off and the bare wires are touching each other, like right here, for example. So I will be repairing multiple sections of wire on this one, and we'll just go from there. So here we're going to go into super fast mode as I unwrap the wiring harness and get it ready to inspect the wires and replace them. Okay, so after we got it all stripped and inspected and figured out which wires are going to do, what I'm doing here is I'm using the heat shrink connectors. I like to cut the wire where it's good. You clean the end of the jacket really good with acetone, wipe it down, make sure there's no dirt on it. And then you strip about a 1/4 inch of wire off of it, or a 1/4 inch of jacket off the wire, and twist it, stick it in the crimp connector, and then crimp that side. Then what I like to do is take a fresh piece of wire right off the roll, put it in the connector and crimp it, and then once it's crimped, I like to hold the old piece of wire next to the connector and then measure out the length of wire that I'm replacing, and then cut both pieces at the same time. That way you get an exact fit, so that when you put the wire bundle back together, and of course you got to tug each time to make sure the crimp connector is good, but here I'm holding the two wires together, and then I measure out the length of wire I need to get past all the damage part, and then I'm just going to simply cut both wires right there. Yep, out goes the bad wire, in goes the new. And strip it, put a connector on it. Like so, crimp it down. Make sure it's on there, can't pull it off. Then take the other end of the wire, where you just cut it, strip about a 1/4 inch of that. And see if there was a little bit of residual dirt on that one, so I wiped it off. Even though I had wiped it with acetone, it still left something there. And then insert it into the connector. Oh, needs a little more twisting on that one. Then crimp it. And of course, make sure it's in there good. And move on to the next one. And what I'm doing with these is basically replacing one wire at a time so that you can't get them mixed up. And then after I get them all done, then what I'll do is I'll heat shrink them and seal all of them at the same time. Okay, so now that all the wires have been replaced, now we're at the point of putting the wrapping back on the wiring harness. So, needless to say, it's a long process. This whole process actually took a couple days on a weekend, and getting it done and getting it all right was a very time-consuming process. So there's obviously quite a bit of film that was left on the cutting room floor after this. I didn't want to get it so long and so boring. The main point of this is that, you know, if you're careful, if you replace one wire at a time and so on, almost anybody can repair damaged wiring in a wiring harness on a vehicle. So and that's the whole point of this, is to get this forklift running again. It's kind of hindering things with the pole barn, with the new workshop pole building that we're making. So, and here you can see we're getting close to the end. Everything's going back together very nicely. The wiring harness actually fits much better and stays away from the radiator, which I think is part of the problem. I think the wiring got melted against the radiator partially, so, or either that or chafed on it, I don't know which. But anyway, I'm real happy with the way it turned out and the way it's going together. Here I'm simply trying to make sure that there's no way that that wiring can lean up against that radiator again. And here we have the finished product, so to speak. The wiring harness is all covered and protected. It's got the armoring plastic tubing on it and tape, and it's all segregated like it's supposed to be. Everything checked out with a continuity meter again. Okay, so we've got the only two of the warning lights when I turn the key just a little bit here to run, and that's good because they aren't all lit up now. So, success. Excellent.